while most people think of stroke as something that happens suddenly, without warning, without cause, the truth is that for the majority of stroke survivors, the conditions that led to that moment were building for years. Inside the blood vessels, inside the brain's blood supply, silently, steadily. And some of the most significant contributors to that buildup are foods. Ordinary, everyday foods that are in most American kitchens right now. Foods that don't come with a warning label. Foods that most people over 50 have eaten their entire lives without anyone ever connecting them to stroke risk. Today I'm going to name 5 of them. I'm going to explain exactly what they do inside the body. And I'm going to give you clear, practical alternatives that you can start using immediately. Because the most powerful stroke prevention tool available isn't a medication, it's what you put on your plate every single day. Please watch this all the way through. One of these foods may be on your table right now. Before we get to the 5 foods, I want to make sure you understand how a stroke happens, because that understanding is what makes this food information feel as urgent as it should. The brain is the most blood-hungry organ in the body. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but consumes roughly 20% of your body's entire blood and oxygen supply. Every second, billions of brain cells depend on a constant, uninterrupted flow of oxygenated blood through a vast network of blood vessels into large ones and incredibly tiny ones to stay alive and functioning. Stroke occurs when that flow is interrupted. In the most common type of stroke, which accounts for nearly 9 out of every 10 cases, a clot or a buildup of plaque blocks a blood vessel in or leading to the brain. The brain cells in the affected area begin to die within minutes, not hours, minutes. In the other type, a blood vessel in the brain ruptures, often because years of high blood pressure have weakened its walls to a breaking point. In both cases, the outcome depends enormously on what was happening inside those blood vessels, long before the stroke occurred. How narrow were they? How inflamed? How much plaque had accumulated? How high had blood pressure been running? And this is where food enters the picture, not as a minor lifestyle factor, but as one of the most direct and consistent influences on the state of those vessels over time. Every meal is either adding to the conditions that increase stroke risk or contributing to the conditions that reduce it. That is not an overstatement. That is the clear, consistent finding of decades of cardiovascular research. And so, let's talk about which everyday foods are adding to the danger and then how to change. Of course, let's begin with something sitting in the refrigerator of almost every American household: bacon, sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, salami, packaged deli turkey, ham, and roast beef. These foods are convenient, familiar, and deeply woven into the American breakfast and lunch routine. They are also consistently linked in research to increased stroke risk, and the mechanism is straightforward. Processed meats are extraordinarily high in sodium. A single serving of deli meat can contain 500 to 800 milligrams of sodium, nearly half the recommended daily limit for someone over 50, in just a few thin slices. When sodium intake is chronically high, blood pressure rises, and high blood pressure is the single most significant modifiable risk factor for stroke. More than smoking, more than diabetes, more than cholesterol. But it doesn't stop at sodium. The chemical compounds used to preserve and cure these meats, particularly nitrates, have been shown to damage the inner lining of blood vessels, promoting inflammation and the kind of arterial stiffening that makes stroke more likely over time. Think about a 69-year-old man who starts every morning with bacon and eggs, packs a ham sandwich most days for lunch, and thinks of these as reasonable traditional choices. He takes his blood pressure medication faithfully, but his sodium intake is consistently 3 times the recommended level, and his vascular inflammation is being quietly stoked by every processed meat meal. The swap is genuinely simple. Fresh cooked chicken or turkey you prepare yourself, canned salmon or sardines, hard-boiled eggs. These provide the same protein and convenience without the sodium, load in preservatives that stress the blood vessels every single day. Here is one that tends to genuinely shock people because soup feels like health food, and it can be. Homemade soup, rich in vegetables and made without excessive salt, is one of the most nourishing meals available. But the canned and packaged versions that line most grocery store shelves are a different story entirely. A single can of popular condensed soup, though even the Classic chicken noodle or tomato varieties that feel light and wholesome can contain 800 to 1,200 milligrams of sodium per serving, and many cans are designed to contain 2 servings, meaning finishing the can delivers close to or exceeding an entire day's worth of sodium in one meal. The same is true for instant noodles, packaged rice dishes, microwave meals, and seasoning packets of all kinds. The sodium levels in these products are not accidental. Sodium is a powerful preservative and flavor enhancer, and manufacturers use it generously. For the blood vessels of someone over 50, this sodium flood is a direct and repeated stress. The vessels retain fluid, pressure rises, the walls absorb more force with every heartbeat, and the conditions that lead to stroke quietly worsen. What you can do: seek out soups labeled low sodium or no salt added. They exist. They are becoming more widely available, and a little home seasoning with herbs and spices closes the flavor gap entirely. Better yet, make a simple batch of vegetable or bean soup at home once a week. The sodium difference between homemade and canned is staggering, and your blood vessels feel that difference over time. This one surprises people even more than the first two, because refined carbohydrates don't taste salty, don't feel dangerous, and have been a morning staple for generations. But here is what happens inside the body after a breakfast of white toast, a pastry, a bagel, or a bowl of sweetened cereal. These refined carbohydrates are broken down almost immediately into sugar. Blood glucose spikes rapidly. The body responds with a surge of insulin. Triglycerides, a type of blood fat that contributes directly to plaque formation in arteries, rise. Inflammation in the blood vessel walls increases, and over time, this repeated pattern contributes to insulin resistance and the kind of metabolic disruption that significantly elevates stroke risk. Research has linked high consumption of refined carbohydrates and added sugar to increased stroke risk independent of other factors, not just because of the weight gain they can contribute to, but because of the direct inflammatory and metabolic effects on the blood vessels themselves. There is also a particular connection between high sugar intake and atrial fibrillation, the irregular heart rhythm we discussed in a previous video, which is itself one of the most powerful independent risk factors for stroke. The practical shift here is not about eliminating carbohydrates. It is about choosing ones that the body processes slowly: steel-cut oats with berries and walnuts, whole grain bread with seeds, an egg with a piece of fruit. These choices produce a fraction of the blood sugar response and a fraction of the vascular strain compared to the refined alternatives. This category catches people off guard because many pickled and fermented foods have a reputation for being healthy, and some of them, in moderation, genuinely are. But the version of these foods most commonly consumed in the American diet, commercially pickled vegetables, certain condiments, soy sauce, cured olives, salted nuts, and heavily seasoned snack foods, carry sodium levels that add up far more quickly than people realize. 2 tablespoons of soy sauce alone can contain more than 1,000 milligrams of sodium. A serving of commercially pickled cucumbers can add another 300 to 500 milligrams. When these are eaten alongside other processed foods through the day, the cumulative sodium load becomes enormous, and its effect on blood pressure and stroke risk is cumulative as well. The research connecting high sodium intake to stroke risk is among the most consistent in all of cardiovascular medicine. Reducing sodium from all sources, including these easily overlooked ones, is one of the most direct dietary interventions for stroke prevention available. Look for reduced sodium versions of soy sauce and condiments. Rinse canned or jarred vegetables before eating them to reduce surface sodium. Season food with citrus, vinegar, herbs, garlic, and spices, all of which add enormous flavor without adding blood pressure risk. We close with the category that has appeared in almost every script in this series, because its connection to cardiovascular risk is so consistent and so underappreciated. Sugary drinks. Not just soda. Most people already know soda is a poor choice. The ones that do the most quiet damage are the ones people reach for believing they are making a healthy decision. Sweetened fruit juices, vitamin waters, sports drinks, bottled smoothies, sweet tea, flavored coffees with syrup. These beverages deliver significant amounts of rapidly absorbed sugar with little or no fiber, protein, or nutritional buffer. The result is a blood sugar spike that drives inflammation, raises triglycerides, promotes arterial plaque buildup, and, with regular, daily consumption, meaningfully increases the risk of the metabolic and vascular conditions that lead to stroke. A 2019 study published in a major nutrition journal found that people who consumed the most sugary drinks had significantly higher stroke risk than those who consumed the least, and this held true even after accounting for weight and other factors. The effect appeared to be direct, metabolic, vascular. The most heart and brain protective drink is water, followed by unsweetened green tea, which contains compounds that actively support blood vessel health, followed by plain black coffee in moderate amounts, which research has associated with reduced stroke risk in several large studies. If you currently drink juice every morning, replacing that single habit with water and eating the whole fruit instead is one of the most impactful single dietary changes you can make for your stroke risk. Why do these 5 foods affect stroke risk so specifically? They all operate through similar mechanisms, and those mechanisms converge on the same target: the health of the blood vessels supplying the brain. Excess sodium drives blood pressure higher, stressing and damaging vessel walls with every heartbeat. Refined carbohydrates and added sugar drive inflammation and metabolic disruption that promotes plaque formation. Preservatives and processed meats damage the vessel lining directly. The accumulated effect of these foods eaten daily for years and decades creates the conditions inside the blood vessels: the narrowing, the stiffening, the plaque, the elevated pressure that make a stroke not just possible, but increasingly likely. After 50, the arteries have already absorbed decades of these inputs. They have less reserve. They are less forgiving. The foods that may have been processed without obvious consequence at 35 are now interacting with a vascular system that is more vulnerable to their effects. This is why dietary choices after 50 matter more, not less, than they did at any earlier point in life. Everything I have described today is actionable, not eventually, not after a major overhaul of your entire life, starting with the next meal you eat. The single most impactful dietary change for stroke prevention is reducing sodium. Read labels before you buy. Cook more at home. Season with herbs, citrus, garlic, and spices instead of salt. Choose low-sodium versions when packaged options are unavoidable. This one change done consistently directly lowers blood pressure, and lower blood pressure directly reduces stroke risk. The second most impactful change is replacing refined carbohydrates and sweetened beverages with whole foods and water. The blood sugar and inflammatory effects of these foods accumulate, and so does the benefit of replacing them. Beyond food, the lifestyle factors that most directly protect against stroke are the same ones that protect the heart: daily movement, quality sleep, not smoking, moderate alcohol consumption, and managing stress in a way that keeps cortisol levels from chronically elevating blood pressure. Know your blood pressure number, know your blood sugar, know your cholesterol. These 3 numbers together paint the picture of your stroke risk, and all 3 respond to the food changes we talked about today. And if you are on blood pressure medication, take it. Every day, without exception. The protection it provides against stroke is real, well documented, and depends entirely on consistency. I want to close with something I hope stays with you long after this video ends. A stroke does not just affect the person it happens to. It changes everything. For a spouse who becomes a caregiver overnight. For children who suddenly see a parent differently. For grandchildren who may not fully understand why things are not the same as before. The ripple of a stroke moves through every relationship, every plan, every ordinary moment that was taken for granted. And the most powerful thing about everything we talked about today is this: so much of stroke risk is within your influence. Not all of it, but enough of it that the choices you make at your next meal genuinely matter. The decision to check a sodium label matters. The glass of water instead of juice matters. The bowl of oats instead of the sugary cereal matters. Not because any single meal will save you, but because the direction you choose, consistently, meal after meal, week after week, changes what is happening inside those blood vessels, quietly, positively, in the same steady, accumulating way that the wrong choices cause the damage. You have more power here than you may have realized before today. Use it. Please share this video with someone you love, with the people at your table, with anyone over 50 who deserves to know that what they eat is directly connected to the health of their brain. Like this video, subscribe for more, and leave me a comment. Which of these 5 foods surprised you the most? Take care of your brain. Feed it like it matters, because it does. And so do you.